Hello, I'm Roby, and in the Da Nang Vietnam Cultural Exchange Center we have a lot of children coming for the art gallery or just to play some games. Among other games, they love to play chess. Well, they want to learn to play, but we have other activities. There are good chess clubs in Da Nang, but they just want to try to play it. So I decided to make a few videos so they can learn the basic, or the parents can do so, and then they can teach their own children. In the previous video I explained how the pieces move, and now we go on with the playing. So anyone who is just learning to play chess usually finds it's wonderful to see that board full of mysterious places. Even if you as a beginner know how to move them, that doesn't help at all. When you're playing against an experienced player, it usually doesn't take long before you see the familiar thing from the movies. Your opponent looks at you and plays one of the pieces while saying, "Checkmate." It has made chess incredibly popular and mysterious. And I have to admit, I often don't understand the checkmate what we're supposed to see on that board in the movie. So you also want to learn to play chess, to play with your grandchildren or other friends. However, with what book or video should we start? When I did my research into chess books for beginners, I noticed quickly that the better the chess player, the worse the book was. Now I had experienced myself. My father was one of the strongest players in Belgium, and he gave me one lesson when I was about 12, after which I didn't touch the chess pieces again until I was 20. Strong players have difficulties to understand the problems of a beginner. How does the playing go for a beginner? Well, whether you play with white or black, pretty soon, actually from the first move, you ask yourself what to play and why. Anyone who has some experience with playing chess is constantly asked, what is the best opening? The answer to that is very simple, but usually not what people want to hear. People want to know which are the best moves to make. If only were it that simple. But there is a reason why there are thousands of books about openings, and there are still thousands more to come. Because there are so many good openings, it's easier to look at the essence of chess. The goal of chess is to checkmate the other king. That is the end of the game. Generally speaking, you can reach that in the end in two complete different ways. Firstly, by checkmating the king in the middle of the game with a nice attack, as we saw in the game at the end of the previous video. If that doesn't work, you end up in the end game where there are often only a few pawns left on the board. A single pawn that then promotes is enough to checkmate the other. We also saw an example of this in the previous video. So it's clear that when we know how to end a game in a winning way, the answer to the question, what is the best opening, is obvious. The best opening is when you end up in the middle game from which a winning king's attacks is possible, or which you end up in a good end game. What kind of middle games are good to realize this? As for king's attacks, there are so many of them that it's impossible to learn to see the different possibilities at first. However, king's attacks can be divided into three groups. Firstly, as a result of opening trap, as in the above mentioned game. Secondly, by a well-thought attack on the wing where the king is located. And finally, it can suddenly arise from the situation on the board, often by sacrificing one or more pieces, after which a checkmate attack follows. For all those situations, one must already be an experienced player with sufficient knowledge of openings, pawn structures and tactical possibilities. The end game is much more clear to beginning players and also of a great importance. So in this video I'm going to show you some essential checkmates in the end game. Although it's more convenient to demonstrate the moves on a real board, I only use diagrams for these videos. The reason is very simple. When you play a game, you are not allowed to try things out. You have the position in front of you and you have to try out the possibilities in your mind while talking inside yourself. What should I do? Maybe this. So by working out diagrams and explaining the considerations, you learn to work from what is possible. In a game, you have to play with the piece you are touching. So you have to try out moves in your mind before you play your move on the board. So we start with the most easiest, checkmating with the rook. And we start with 2 rooks. For this we don't even need our own king. The principle is very important because it shows how 2 rooks can work together optimally. And this cooperation goes like this. The rooks alternately function as a blocking rook and as a driving rook. In this diagram we see the white king on square e4. When you do not know where e4 is, you have to watch the first video. So the king can move to 3 rows and 3 lines. 2 rooks can only cover 2 rows or 2 lines at a time, which means that when they attack the king, he still can move to the 3rd row or line, except when the king is on the edge of the board. So the first thing we have to do is therefore think about which edge we are going to drive the king to. For this example, we choose the checkmate the white king on the 1st row, so somewhere on a square between A1 and #1. The principle is now simple. In this situation, 1 rook ensures that the king, being on the 3rd row, cannot move to the 5th row. So we placed a rook on the 5th row, at least if this is safe. In our diagram we have rook on a2 and rook on f6. We cannot safely move that rook from f6 to f5 because then it will be captured. But we can move rook from a2 to the 5th rank, where it will block the white king to go to the 5th rank, and we do so. White is now on the move and can no longer move to the 5th rank, nor to f4 because of the rook on f6. The king can now remain on the 5th rank and move to the 3rd rank. If he does the latter, the blocking rook simply moves from a5 to a4, and doing so the rook is now blocking the 4th rank. If the king remains on the 4th rank, by moving to d4, the rook must remain on e5 because otherwise the king can escape to the 5th rank. So now the other rook will become the driving rook. We move the rook from f6 to f4 and give check. Now the king must move to the 3rd rank, and since attack is the best defense, he moves to e3 and attacks the rook. That is now on f4. Of course, that rook does not return to f6 because this rook has now become the blocking rook, so it remains on the 4th rank, looking for a safe place as far away from the white king as possible, and therefore moves to square b4. Be carefully so not to square a4, because the rook on the 4th rank is now the blocking rook, and the rook on a5 is now going to drive the king to the bottom rank, and to do that he has to go to the 3rd rank, to a3. However, that's not possible when there is rook on a4. The king now goes from e3 to d3 and in the direction of the rooks that attack him. Black now plays rook a5, a3, check. And the king now has to go to the 2nd rank and plays king c2. as you see in this diagram. Now black cannot give check with his rook on b2 because then he will be captured. Checking with rook on the a file is of course pointless because then the king will run back to the third rank. That is why black must first move his rook from b4 to h4. The king will then go to b2, attacking the rook on a3, after which black plays the rook from a3 to g3. Whatever the king plays now, black plays rook h4 to h2, check, and the king must now go to the bottom rank again. It doesn't matter to which field he plays on the next move, black plays rook g3, g1, checkmate. What beginners often do is to start from the situation where the king is on e4 and a rook on a5, and then use the other rook from f6 to e6 to check, and then the king runs back to d4, and then they give check on d6, after which the king goes back to a4. Checking via the lines is therefore pointless if you want to chase the king to the bottom row. The next is the king plus a rook. Even when we only have one rook and a king, the checkmate is a bit identical. Only you can give check with your you cannot give check with your king. So the task of the king will be the block of the escape rooks of the enemy king. When the kings are directly opposite each other, there are 3 squares between the 2 kings that neither can go to. In this diagram, we see the black king on square e6 and the white king on square e4. The black rook is on square b7. At first glance, giving check on b4 is the best. But this is not the case, because white will play king d3. Black must then take the opposite again and play king d5. After which white moves to c3 and attack the rooks, or the white king goes back to e3. So, but in neither case can black chase the white king to the second rank on the next move. That's only possible if the white king cannot capture the rook while the black king is blocking the squares of the fourth rank in the meantime. Just try it out. This can take a long time, while there is a much faster way to checkmate the white king. Instead of giving check on b4, black plays the rook to d7. The white king can now no longer escape in the direction of the A rank, so the rook starts by blocking and not by chasing. If the white king now moves to f4, black king plays f6 and again takes the opposition and blocks the squares e5, f4 and g5. The white king will now move back to the center to e4, where he has the most freedom of movement. As long as the rook is on the d rank, he cannot go any further. That is why the rook must remain on the d rank. Therefore, black plays rook d7, rook d8. And now follows a typical series of moves. When white stays on the fourth rank, he can only go to f4. Black now checks on d4. The white king must now go to the third rank, so back to the center to e3. He then immediately attacks the rook. When black now brings the rook to safety but stays on the fourth rank by playing to a4, for example, the white king can escape to d3, and therefore the rook must stay on the d file, and so play black his king from f6 to e5 to defend the rook and to approach the lower ranks. White king will now play to f3 to escape via g4. So black plays his king to f5. White king now plays again e3 and black plays his rook to d8 again. Now the white king can move to the second rank or to f3. When he goes down to the second rank, the black king goes to the third rank while keeping the opposition. If the king goes to f3, black plays rook d3 check. The white king must then move to the second rank and probably attacks the rook, after which the king from black moves to e4, and we get a repetition of the moves until the white king is on the bottom rank and is checkmated. When the white king was on f3, he played to e3 in our example, but of course he could have played g3 as well. In that case, the black king goes to g5 and takes opposition, and here again, if the white king walks back to f3, then black cuts off his way to the center by playing rook a8. Well, the checkmate with the queen, it's a bit the same way, but we should especially pay attention that the queen covers many more squares than the rook. It is easy to cut off too many possibilities for the enemy king and create a draw. So we already saw this in the previous video. Checkmating with the bishops, while the rooks and the queen can cover both the black and the white squares, a bishop can only cover one color. So the enemy can always flee to a square of the other color. Your own king cannot cover all those squares. Hence, when there are only two opposite kings left and one bishop, you cannot give checkmate, and it is a draw. With two bishops of a different color, you can give checkmate. From these diagrams, we start with bishop f6, e5, check. The king must go to a8, and now we give with bishop f5 to e4, checkmate. Checkmate with the knight is difficult. A knight can cover squares of different colors, but it always covers just an isolated square. The attacked king can still go in all directions. That is why when there are only two kings and one knight left, you cannot give checkmate and it's a draw. Even with two knights, it does not work. This checkmate position with two knights can only be achieved if black cooperates very much and makes a very strange move. With three knights, it's possible, but it's not really easy. To checkmate with a pawn, you cannot give checkmate with only one pawn left, but the pawn can promote when it reaches the other 8th rank. If it promotes to a rook or a queen, checkmate can be given, as we have already seen. The pawn must then reach the 8th rank, and in the next video we will see how it usually is possible and what you should pay attention to. In that video we also give some examples of checkmating during the game. We conclude this video with an example of how you can give checkmate with a knight in a special situation. This position does not look good for white. Black threatens one rook f8 onto f1, checkmate. Black also threatens g7, takes the knight on h6. Fortunately, it's white's turn and he plays queen d5, g8, check. The black king cannot move away and cannot capture the queen because of the knight on h6. So only the rook remains that can capture the queen. Rook takes queen on g8. After white gives checkmate with his knight, knight h6, f7, checkmate. Thanks for watching and see you in the next video where we'll look at the promoting pawn and also some typical checkmate attacks.